My guest this week is Jessica Nash. In 2011, she became a primary school teacher, something that she had wanted to do since her childhood. But in 2018, Jess experienced burnout and a breakdown, which led to her spending time in hospital after she became ill with a perforated bowel. Now Jessica works part-time as a primary school teacher whilst running the Happy Teacher course and her coaching business. And through starting her coaching business, Jess has taken back control of her life. She's found ways to make herself a happy teacher. And now she helps other teachers find strategies to deal with the stresses of the classroom. This was a really great interview and we had such a wonderful chat. So let's just get to it. So Jessica, welcome to the Teachers Podcast today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
So we already know each other. We've already had chats. So it's really good to talk about your topic for a change. So you're here to talk about the impact that stress can have on the body. And I think this is really topical. And it's interesting because I saw that you put on Facebook about being able to switch off for Christmas. And I thought that would be great to make sure that it goes out before then. So why do you think this topic is so important for teachers then?
Well, especially with everything that's going on at the moment with that dreaded C word and being in schools.
Mm-hmm. Christmas? You mean the dreaded Christmas
Obviously,
word?
yeah, the dreaded Christmas word. There is so much stress going on because alongside my Happy Teacher coaching, I'm a supply teacher as well. So I'm going into schools and speaking to teachers and seeing what they're going through. I was in a school the other day where it had 15 members of staff off. So you're having to pick up other people's workload to ensure other people's classes are fit and ready to go for the day ahead, but also sustaining your own workload. So there's just this increased workload happening in schools. And it's just building up a lot of stress, overwhelm, exhaustion. And as like the the budget the other day with all this money being invested into Ofsted, and that again is just another stress for teachers at this moment in time when they're having to juggle so many different things, and that is a big stress in the back of people's minds when they're in school and even when they're outside of school. It's that not being able to switch off, which, you know, taking work home, thinking about this, that and the other. What have I got to do tomorrow? Has this been done? Or what about when little Johnny's done this? How can I further improve him to meet his targets and whatnot? All these things are constantly going on inside a teacher's mind, building up those stress chemicals.
Yeah, and I think there's different kinds of workload as well, isn't there? So you can have the workload that you're in control of, that you do yourself. And I'm not saying that this is right, but you could do loads of work at home and be in control of that. But when you're in school and then you're responsible for somebody else's class, whereas a supply teacher, and there's not a lot of people in school who really know, then you take on that extra responsibility. And I always think that's not necessarily something you can control about when. And I don't know about any other teachers here, but from my own experience, something that I've learned about myself over the last couple of years having children is that I feel very stressed when I feel like the pressure is on for me to do more than one thing at once. So a really good example is when my 5-year-old is like, I'm trying to make a breakfast. So I'm like, right, I'm trying to put the toast in. And she's like, Mummy, can you help me with my reading? Mummy, can you fasten my zip? Mummy, can you? And I'm like, oh, I can't do all of these things at once. And I think that feels very stressful, and that's a situation that teachers are then in when it's like, I'm trying to sort my own class out, but I've also got to make sure that you're okay. Maybe I've got to make sure that 3 other classes are okay. I've got to control behaviour that is out of my control. I don't know what's going to come up, and that, I don't know whether the unknown plays into it, but for me, that's what feels stressful.
Yeah, absolutely. And it brings up that overwhelm, doesn't it? And it's just like you don't know where to turn first, what to do for the best as well in that moment. You know, as teachers, we have to make so many decisions in such a short space of time. Like, no wonder as a workforce, we are absolutely knackered. Like, we're really stressed as a profession. So no wonder, because we have to make so many quick decisions in a short space of time. You're multitasking. Our brains aren't, we're not equipped to multitask. We're not a laptop with all these different windows open. It becomes too much and too overwhelming and too stressful for us.
Also, when a laptop does multitask in that way, you see it slow down. And that's even technology, isn't it? But I just think this is so interesting, trying to find that balance between feeling okay and not feeling okay. Right, okay then. So how is stress having an impact on teachers and the education sector then? I know obviously you've talked about supply, but anything wider?
Yeah, well, so again, COVID, that's having a massive impact, especially when we are in schools, and it's impacting the classroom, it's impacting the teachers who are off sick, people are needed to come in and cover. And like the other day, a school had to close because they didn't have any members of SLT who were well enough. So they actually had to close the school. So it's little things, well, I say little things, that's a big thing, isn't it? That's happening at the moment. And I was reading the new Teacher Wellbeing Index that was released last week, and their statistics are crazy. I've got some of them here, like 72% of education professionals describe themselves as stressed. 46% of them still go into work when they're unwell. And
it's easier. It's easier.
Exactly, absolutely. And go on.
I was just going to say, just going back to what you're saying about all the decisions we make, I actually read that a couple of years ago, and I feel like I learned that after I left teaching, and we don't talk about that as much and how stressful that actually is, and that's why we don't have the day off, because how can we teach somebody to make all those decisions in our place when they don't know our school in a 15-minute email? You can't. And that's why we don't. And I've only learned that through being a business owner and having colleagues. That's what I've learned, that I pass on decision making, or I'm always trying to empower others to make decisions so that I don't necessarily move up hierarchically, but in my job, but how teachers are not given those skills or even the capacity to be able to pass any decisions on. All the decisions are held with them, and it's just, talk about mental load. That's why more women do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that mental load, which I describe it, you've probably heard of it as a stress bucket. So you've got a bucket, and whenever anything you perceive as stressful, that mental load, making all those decisions, emails popping up, someone else has gone off sick, paperwork, EHCP paperwork needs doing, all these little things just accumulate into your bucket, and it just gradually fills up and up and up and up. And I know from my own experience, it got to a point where my stress bucket was literally overflowing. It was all too much, and I couldn't cope with normal day activities, just normal life, couldn't cope with it. So yeah, the mental load, and it's being aware of what that means, what the stresses are for you as a teacher, and understanding what you can do to manage it. Because I feel like well-being has become such a buzzword in education, and but when I go into schools, nothing really is being done for teacher well-being. There are some schools that are actively taking steps to look after staff, but the majority of things I do see is it's just another Ofsted tick box, which is really sad.
Yeah, or just another tick box, thinking that we know what well-being is. And it's interesting because I know that you're passionate about this as well, but it's all in the personal development and not in sort of professional development. But the problem with personal development, I know we've had conversations about this before, is you have to be in a place where you're ready to receive. If you can't grow personally until you're willing to say, hang on, I could possibly be responsible for some of this, even though I'm not responsible for all of it, or I can choose how I react in this situation, or I can choose X, Y, and Z. And that is such a hard place to come to when you're feeling so overwhelmed by stuff being done to you, being thrown at you. And that is, yeah. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about personal development.
Do you know what, Claire? Absolutely. I remember this. I had this experience. I was full-time teaching, and the school brought in some wellbeing people to give us some training. And I was so closed off to it. I was not open to it at all, because in my head, I was going, this is a load of crap.
Yeah.
Like, do they not realise I've got to go and do this display? I've got these books to mark. I've got this paperwork that needs to do. I've got to reply to emails. I've got to ring so-and-so's mom. And all this was in my head. And I was thinking, this is a waste of time. I could be doing this instead. I didn't realise at the time that I was in a load of stress. Hence why I was thinking and feeling that way in that moment of time. But I wasn't open to it, let alone be in a position to listen and take on board what they were going to say and action it as well. So for me, that was a real standout experience. When I look back at it, I wasn't open to it, but I really should have been. I wish I would have been, because it probably would have prevented me from experiencing burnout and having a breakdown. But I feel like I had to go through that for me to change the way I was living, because I knew what I was doing was not sustainable. I'd made myself so ill that I physically couldn't work and do anything, couldn't live a normal daily life because I was so poorly. So that's what it took for me to reach that break point in order for me to look after myself.
And it's so difficult, isn't it? Because, I mean, suppose what you're talking about, somebody coming in, that was real well-being, actually. But often one of the messages is, work less. And it's something I've really learned over the last, 5 years. Like, actually, they're right. Which is kind of weird. And you can do more if your brain's in the right place. But when you've got so much to do, you just think that is not what I need. So we're kind of going off topic here, but I think it's good to bring this up. If you're a member of SLT and you listen to this podcast episode and you're like, look, I really do want to bring real well-being in, because I'm aware that there's a whole cake in the staff room, which I'm like a big, that's not it. That's not it. And I want to bring a real well-being, but I'm worried that it won't be sort of accepted in the way it needs to be accepted. Have you got any kind of ideas how they could start the conversation? Is it in the conversation? Is it something else first? What is the communication that needs to happen so that the staff are kind of ripe, shall we say, for these seeds of well-being actually being planted and doing something rather than falling on the dead soil?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great way of putting it, actually. I feel like, as I can't speak as an SLT member, I haven't been in that position, but I feel like reminding your staff that they are worthy of taking time for themselves. Coming in early, being the first in and being the last out, doesn't mean you are an outstanding teacher. That doesn't be, reminding teachers that you can go home and go to your family. Things can wait. It's not the be all and end all if things aren't done. But I think as well, the lot of things I hear from my happy teacher clients is things are put on us at the last minute, and it's got to be, and it's expected to be done and in place by the end of the week. And that is a big stressor when you've got a to-do list, which is already like this. So it's all about prioritising what needs to be done now, what can wait, and also what can be delegated to people who you feel are capable of doing it. And I really want to emphasize the word capable, because there's nothing worse than saying, would you mind just doing this, and then having to do it yourself again anyway, because it's not been done as you would have wanted it to.
No, I think you're right. And for me, I think I could probably add to this as well, because obviously we've got a lot of ex-teachers at Classroom Secrets, and I feel like a lot of it is about continuous, so giving that message of like family's important, you're important. It's not just the message once, it's got to be a continuous message, and making real time. And I suppose I think it's repeating language that you would expect your teachers in your school to say right now. So things like, I know, you say family leader, I know that right now you're feeling stressed because we've got this on. We had Ofsted 2 weeks ago. We're expecting this. I know all these things, but I want you to put them aside and kind of calling them out. And, you know, yes, you're not going to get 100% who are ready to be like, okay, I'm actually going to listen here. But you're much more likely, I think, as a teacher to be open to something that's going to help if you feel like your leader understands where you're coming from and has put this in place because of that. Not just as we just threw this extra in, well, this is useless to me. And I think that is a good place to start.
Yeah, I love that repetition of it. So you kind of hearing your leader, your member of SLT, reminding you to take that time for you. You are important. Your health is important, because as awful as it sounds, if you're off sick, like I was replaced in a matter of hours, probably in a matter of minutes, to be honest. Whereas my health took a turn, and it took over a year for me to recover from what I experienced. So you are really important, and I suppose hearing that from whoever you are working for and reminding yourself that you are important, hearing it from them and knowing they understand the position you're in. Because I feel like that's where a bit of loggerheads come, you know, with that. I don't feel like they understand what pressure I'm under, the work I've got to do, and that there's that kind of miscommunication as such.
I think a lot of it comes as well from the leader demonstrating that themselves. So they can't say that and then not do it themselves, because that shows that they actually don't believe it. And I do think in the education sector, something that definitely needs to change is understanding when you work best. So it's something that I've done a lot of work on, and we're doing work on at Classroom Secrets now, is I actually want people to work. I want them to give me the best, and I want them to feel easy. So a really good example is, if I want to write a podcast episode for my other podcast, I could sit there for 3 hours and really just like try to think of things and like, I really need to get it done. But if I don't worry about it and I know it's coming up to write a certain date, I could spend 10 minutes, and yes, it might be on a weekend, but when the inspired ideas come, I just write them all down, and then when I come to it, it takes 45 minutes. And it's that, right? How do we use time effectively? How do we work when we're at our best? How do we say, no, enough is enough when we're not at our best? And be allowed to say, I know the deadline was this, but I didn't get this done because of X, Y, and Z. But if I do it then, it will take me a third of the time. And, you know, for leaders to go, that makes so much sense. I'm so glad you're so sensible. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And it's often something I talk about, you know, yes, we take work home, but if you believe that it feels right for you, you're motivated to do it, you're happy to get it done, and it's going to take you a certain amount of time, go for it. Absolutely go for it. But like you said, if you're sat there almost procrastinating on it, and making it take even longer than it could do, that's when we need to look at, hang on, what's best for me right now. I know from my own experience, especially with setting up my business and having to write copy and things like that, it feels like I have a mental block sometimes. It's like, right, sometimes I have found myself just sat there scrolling on Facebook, and then I'm like, oh, Jess,
you're supposed to be working.
You've fallen into that trap.
Yeah.
But I know for me, if I literally just go outside and have a walk for even just 15 minutes, it's kind of reinvigorates me again, and gives me that breathing space to have a bit of a break. It's knowing when to take a break, when what it is that's stopping you from from doing what you want to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and what's your understanding of what that break does? Is your understanding that 15-minute break will make the work quicker, rather than you thinking, well, I don't have time to take the break because I want to get it finished. It's understanding that, and that is a whole box to open. That's what schools should be bringing as training. How do I've got all this work to do. How do I find my best times to work? How do I use my inspired time? How do I work so that I can get things done more quickly and easily? Because, that's why I write some pointers on a weekend, because I want it to feel easy, not hard. Because when it feels easy, I'm like, yeah, bang it out. And teachers are creative. So anyway, so obviously you've talked about yourself, but why are you so passionate then about helping teachers to understand what causes them stress and then how to manage it?
Yeah, so I've briefly talked about my own experience. I was full-time teaching. During my decade or so in education, I have been signed off work with stress 3 times, and it was that 3rd time which led to experiencing burnout and a breakdown, and I ended up in hospital with a perforated bowel. And at the time, doctors were like, we don't know why someone so young as you has experienced this. It's not common. But actually, after going through my coaching diploma and researching all about stress and things like that, I've realised it was actually years and years of chronic stress which led to me having a perforated bowel, because my gut, my digestive system wasn't working properly because my body was in stress response.
Yeah.
You don't need your digestive system when you are in stress response. You need to fight or you need to flee. And your blood goes to your muscles, your heart, your lungs, ready to take action. So your digestive system is not needed in that moment. So no wonder I've experienced, I'm now left with a lifelong gut disease because of it. So it's my experience of going through that and recovering from the experience of burnout, but also seeing so many of my teacher friends who have been signed off with stress, who are depressed, who are living with anxiety, who rely on antidepressants or wine and chocolate and things like that. That's why I'm so passionate about teacher wellbeing and kind of my mission as such is to create this wellness movement in education. I see myself working with teachers, helping them to feel happier in their work life and their personal life, because that has an impact on their colleagues that they work with and the children that they teach. It's that ripple effect. And for at the moment, the workload and everything isn't getting any better. So we have to take it upon ourselves when we're ready to make changes that are going to benefit us. And hopefully one day, I want to be up there in government making changes and supporting teacher wellbeing. But until then, we've got to do it for ourselves. We want to have to do it for ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, I'm excited to see this because I'm all for this. I'll help you. I'll be there with you. Bring me along for the ride. But a question. So, what do you feel you've learned then that you weren't doing? What since doing your coaching diploma, since researching all about stress, what do you feel like now that you weren't doing?
That's such a good question. I mean, there's so many things that are coming up into my mind right now.
Give me 2.
So I think for me is recognising when I'm stressed. What in particular has brought on that stress. Getting curious about it. What is it that's made me feel stressed, that's bringing on the overwhelm, the frustration, the sleepless nights? What was that's made me feel this way? And then secondly is learning how to deal with it. For me, I used to drink a lot. I know I shouldn't probably admit that, but I did. I used to drink a lot.
Do you know what? I think a lot of teachers do have a glass of wine on a night.
Yeah. I'd drink a lot. I'd smoke a lot. I would eat a lot. It was all very excessive. I got myself into a lot of debt because I would shop, and that felt good in that moment of time, but in the long run, it didn't actually deal with the stress I was experiencing. It just gave me a short-term nice feeling, and that was it. So it had this massive impact on my life. So learning how to effectively manage the stress I was experiencing, that has been an absolute game changer for me.
Yeah, I love that, because that's the thing, isn't it? It's great that you've changed, but how did you do it? So on to how then. If you're a teacher listening now, you know, this is always my favourite part of the podcast. What are the 3 actionable steps that you can share for teachers that they could just implement, you know, over the next week that will, you know, help them see a difference, you know, to manage their stress?
Yeah, so like I said, the first one is recognising what is bringing stress into your life. What is that stressor, and how is that making you feel? Because if you want to make a change, you've first got to understand what it is that's making you feel that way.
So how would you recognise it? What are some techniques that you could use?
That's great. So when you are stressed, it brings up loads of signs in your body. Things like not being able to sleep properly, feeling irritable, feeling nauseous, having stomach cramps, feeling overwhelmed, tearful. Little things like that. Again, I say little things. These things are all signs of stress. So it's recognising when those are coming up for you, and kind of tracing it back to things like where I started getting really upset. What happened before that to make me feel this way? Because it all stems from a thought. Where what we think creates how we feel.
Yes.
And then when we feel a certain way, we behave a certain way. So it's tracing it back to what was the thought, what happened that made me feel this way. And I know that's easier said than done. It takes time. It takes a lot of practice, because your brain's a muscle, and that's what you are training to be to become more aware of, is your thoughts. It's like going to the gym and doing one sit-up and expecting a six-pack. It's something that you've got to keep practicing and doing over a period of time.
Yeah, it's hard to become aware. Something that I would find easier in terms of this particular exercise is to journal it. And you don't have to necessarily it's not Dear Diary. It's just the day and what you're feeling. And that could be notes on your phone or something. But sometimes I'll write things like, I'll ask myself a question like, why when I feel this feeling, am I feeling this feeling? And then tracing it back and just writing a note of it, because then you don't get all the answers straight away, do you? You don't think the question and then think, oh, I know the answer. You might have a little thing, and then a few days later it kind of pops into your mind and you're like, oh, that, I'm going to add that to my list on my journal. And then a few days later you discover this other thing, and that's how you become more self-aware, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Journaling is amazing. It's something I've been doing it for years now, morning and evening. And I always start the day with, right, how do I feel right now? Where has this feeling come from? What's made me feel this way? And how do I want to feel? So that's a great way to start that self-awareness, like you said. And again, as well, at the end of the day, how am I feeling again? What's happened? What's made me feel this way? Because when a lot of teachers I speak to struggle with sleep, and it's because we're taking on that baggage from the day, and we can't relax and get to sleep properly. So that's another way of releasing whatever's going on in here, so you can hopefully get a better night's sleep. Yeah,
I absolutely agree. Sometimes if I feel quite stressed, I have this technique now where I journal it, because I don't want to sit with it. I want it to go. And I find that journaling does help, because sometimes you need to have a conversation with somebody, but sometimes you can't have that conversation, and you just need to be like, listen, right, I'm going to pretend I'm having the conversation with you in my little, well, for me, it's Evernote. I just use Evernote on everything. Anyway, so that was one. What are your two others?
Yeah, so journaling, I would absolutely recommend moving your body. That's such a great way to release those stress chemicals, because, often as teachers, we're sat on our computers or we're dealing with children, we need to release those stress chemicals that have built up throughout the day. So whether it be, progressive muscle tensing and relaxation, or going for a walk, or if you want to go and do a hardcore workout, go for it. But releasing those stress chemicals by moving your body, that's going to help you to feel a lot better as well, rather than storing them all up. So imagine that stress bucket again, taking that 15 minutes or so to move your body, do some exercise, is going to empty that bucket a bit, so you're not going to overflow.
I love that.
And as well, alongside that, is giving yourself small pockets of time for you each day. So, a few minutes in the morning to do some journaling, or at night time, or 5 minutes at lunchtime to just go and make yourself a cup of tea and enjoy your cup of tea as well, rather than making it, rushing off and forgetting you've made it and drinking it when it's stone cold. So just small pockets of time. I say about 15 minutes. So you can have 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the afternoon, and 5 minutes of an evening. We can find 5 minutes to do something that's going to help you to feel calmer, feel a bit happier as well. That's what's going to get the happy hormones going throughout your body and dampen those stress chemicals.
Thank you. How much of this do you think is choice and mindset around, how do I even word it? Like this 5 minutes, we could even be like, we could go, oh, well, I've only got 5 minutes. Or I could say, okay, it's not ideal, but I've got 5 minutes. And these 5 minutes is going to make a difference. Like, how much do you think revolves around the mindset around it and the choice we make?
Mindset is everything. It really, really is. It, like when we were talking earlier, you can be in that zone where you're like, I've got to get this done, but you're just not getting anywhere with it. Having the mindset and realizing you can have a choice in what you want to do, how you want to think, how you want to feel. That is the key to it all, really.
The key
mindset.
to well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think you've got to have an understanding of it first, because if you're not aware of it, then you don't know, do you? So we can't beat ourselves up over things we've done in the past because we didn't know about them before. But now you've listened to this podcast, you are going to be aware of it, and you're going to, you can have that time to think, like, what can I do for myself in the day? Whether it's 5 minutes or 30 minutes, it's completely up to you.
Yeah. And when will it be quickest for me to mark my books? Is it at the end of the day, or is it in the morning? Or, like, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I used to do this, especially on supply. Are there pockets in the day when, I don't know, maybe you sat at a table with children working and they don't need you 100% of the time, that, you have 3 books on your table and you say, in this session, I'm going to mark 3 books because that's for me, and do the other stuff. Trying to think, right, how do I make it work for me? How's it going to be best for me?
Yeah, absolutely. It is asking yourself and getting curious about what is best for you, because what would work best for me and what would work best for you, Claire, would be different for someone else. So I think as a starting point, it'd be looking at where you're feeling most stress in your day. What is it? And then see where you could potentially change it, whether it needs to be done at a different time of day. Can you bring something in maybe before you do that, whatever it is? It's finding what works best for you and going from there.
Do you know, this has been so good. I'm so happy. This is hopefully going to go out before Christmas and everyone's going to have a really nice Christmas present. This is a great Christmas present for everybody. Tell us more about where we can find you online.
Wonderful, yeah. So I'm found on Facebook and Instagram. You can find me as Jessica Joan Coach. I've also got a lovely Facebook group dedicated specifically for education professionals. So that is Teacher Work-Life Balance. So you can find me on there as well.
Super. So you should definitely join that group, because I know Jessica will share lots of really good tips, and it's all in the show notes as well, so you don't have to remember what she said. You can just click on and go join that group. But thank you so much. I love talking about stuff like this, because it's the reason why it's so big to me is because it was what I thought I couldn't control, and I've discovered I can, which is amazing to kind of have that feeling, and it makes you feel like, hang on, anything is possible here. And so I just love when I can control things, I think. So.
Yeah, absolutely. When I realised that everything I was experiencing was down to stress, that really gave me the motivation to start looking after myself, because I didn't before. I didn't know how to. I didn't understand it. So yeah, bringing in self-care, looking after yourself, that was my motivator, because I knew what I'd been doing up until that point wasn't working. I'd got so ill, and it gave me that motivation to start making changes and really put me and my health first.
Yeah. Super. Thank you so much. This is going to be so good.
Thank you. It's been amazing.